Number 1. Final Fantasy VIII wasn't done yet. Final Fantasy IX's development started in July 1998 while Final Fantasy VIII was still being developed, with localization of the game literally being completed in September 1999, the same month it was released in America, which is just crazy to me. Development took place in Hawaii to be a compromise to developers that lived in the US. Click on this card to find out why they were in Hawaii to begin with. But here's the interesting part. The crew that worked on Final Fantasy IX, aside from the developers, were all from different parts of the world with different specialties that all helped in the creation of the final game. Character artist for Final Fantasy IX, Toshiyuki Itahana, elaborated on this idea in an interview stating, "The majority of staff were Japanese, but amongst the background designers, we had staff from Germany, someone from France who spoke 5 languages, American staff that had worked on matte paintings for the movie Titanic, and Korean staff working on designing gadgets. It was a team from all around the globe." This around the globe approach to development actually led series composer Nobuo Uematsu to take a 2-week vacation to Europe and visit the various castles and aging structures, while listening to music of the time to get a sense of creating something that he wouldn't have normally created otherwise. Itahana and art director Hideo Minaba credit the overall aesthetic and look of the game to the 1982 movie The Dark Crystal. And if you look up some of the character art and even some of the models and put them up against some of the characters in the movie, the resemblance is astounding. And that movie freaked me out, man. But watch it anyway, it's pretty good. Here, you can borrow it. My favorite fact is coming up, and it's something that really showcases the interesting ways Square develops their games. But first, production errors and huge mistakes. While Final Fantasy IX's initial reception was amazing, reaching gold status in literally less than a year in Germany for surpassing 100,000 units across Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, it wasn't without its errors, or, in something I'll point out later, a huge blunder that even I can't justify, me being a shill according to some people, but whatever, if Square wanted to pay me for Final Fantasy work, that's my dream, kiddos! At any rate, Final Fantasy IX's release was pushed back so it wouldn't interfere with Enix's Dragon Quest VII, as they weren't merged yet, they were rivals at the time. But even with the extra time to get everything right, if you happened to pick up this game in Canada when it was released, you wouldn't have received an English copy of the manual. Square had to ship copies of the English manual to Canadian stores just a few days later. But listen, if you're a fan of the series and of Final Fantasy IX in general, you already know this next thing because it's literally the worst possible way Square could have dropped the ball in any regard. But Final Fantasy IX was the initial benchmark for the Play Online service. Alright, let me back up just a bit for this one. It's absolutely ludicrous. So when I received my copy of Final Fantasy IX on Christmas Day in the year 2000, I also got the strategy guide, and immediately I noticed something off. Across the bottom of the cover of the guide, it said enhanced by playonline.com. I really thought nothing of it as I was just excited about playing the newest game. That's when I noticed things like this. You must cook the right amount of food for the entire group. When you reach this point, go to playonline.com for the correct answer. These days, this probably wouldn't be a big deal, but in the year 2000, phones didn't exist yet that had internet access. In fact, one of the most popular phones of the year 2000 was this Nokia 3310. So I went on my computer and went to Play Online, and that's when everything came crashing down. My computer could barely handle the website. And I seem to recall Play Online costing money, but maybe that's my mind misremembering it all. But at any rate, I didn't want to stop playing the game, go to my computer with a guide that's supposed to get you through the game, just for some tidbit of knowledge that they very easily could have thrown in there. You know, like a strategy guide? Every single page had some keyword-driven clue to getting everything the game had to offer. So, needless to say, I never actually 100%ed this game because I couldn't, even though my parents spent money for the guide. For the record now, all of those secrets have been made available, so apology accepted? Honestly, one of the best guides I've seen to Final Fantasy IX is literally ff9guide.com. It's great, so check that out for sure. Number 3, each location was designed by a different person. We've definitely seen the different ways Square goes about developing their games in teams and delegating responsibilities to different people. Click this card to learn the genius way Final Fantasy VI was developed. But this is a very unique way of developing a game. Essentially, if a person was in charge of a location, say Lindblom, then that person is also in charge of all of the events and dialogue that happens in that location. After all of the story points were figured out individually, everything was then brought to the various directors and planners to see if it would all work out in the grand scheme of the overall story. Series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi had been slightly detached from the series at this point, taking on lesser roles than he had previously been in, all while still overseeing everything. He was heavily working on Square Pictures and making movies, but for Final Fantasy IX he was back in the main seat, taking a very hands-on approach as he felt the game was an important one since it had echoes of previous games throughout and was back in a medieval setting. However, Sakaguchi being back in the main seat didn't come without its problems. Itahana recalled a big moment during the end of the game's development that led to an uproar within the development team, stating, "As development entered the final stages, we were told that the producer Hironobu Sakaguchi wanted us to change Garnet's design. He didn't think she looked charming enough for a heroine. At that point, all of the characters were pretty much solidified, and that kind of suggestion that late into development can be quite the problem, as cutscenes were already rendered. But Garnet's final design was ultimately one of the ones that came about during that tumultuous change, so I guess it ended up being a good thing." Way to go, Sakaguchi! Number 4, Sakaguchi's original memo for Final Fantasy IX. So I managed to find, via the Wayback Machine, a memo straight from Sakaguchi's old hard drive, dated July 1998, and it essentially lists out in detail the opening cinematic all the way through to the airship crash in the forest. It is far too long to go over everything, but it's straight from the mind of the man himself, which to me is just, it doesn't get much better. It's essentially the same as you having something in your notes app from 20-something years ago, not meant for public consumption, but important in a historical sense. There are several differences here and there, but my favorite parts are the bits where he doesn't quite have something fleshed out yet, so he'll put words like something like that after a gesture or a description of a character. I've got a link in the description if you want to read it yourself, and if you do take the time to go through it, I think you'll be quite surprised by just how much detail it goes into despite so many other things happening at the time in Sakaguchi's life. Every facial expression and gesture is detailed, as well as things like the idea that since it's a play, extraordinary magic and such can be used. This got me thinking though. If only there were still surviving documents about the development or even early concept writings of any of the first 6 Final Fantasy games, especially 6. I think I would probably cry if there were. Anyway, I highly urge you to check it out if you're able to. It's something that I don't see many people referencing, so maybe I've just uncovered something huge, I don't know. You're welcome. And number 5, the number 9. Of course, I could have went through all of the allusions to the other Final Fantasy games, all of the little references and stuff, but that would make this video 30 minutes longer than it already is. So I'm gonna talk about something I actually didn't know, and that is the sheer amount of things that are based off the number 9. I'm just gonna kinda rapid fire these for the sake of time, so buckle up, Buttercup. There are 9 active members in the Knights of Pluto. At the time of the game's release, Pluto was considered to be the 9th planet of the solar system. Regent Cid Fabul IX is the 9th Cid in Lindblum's lineage. This may also be a reference to each prior Final Fantasy game having a character called Cid, including the unseen one from the original game. His predecessor and father, Cid VIII, developed the first mist-powered airships in 1762, led the Lindblum Armada in 1771, and died in 1780. Each event has a span of 9 years between them. In the track Ambush Attack, Nobuo Uematsu pulls off an obscure, rarely used 9/4 time signature in the piece's opening measure before switching to 4/4. If one counts Alexander, Dagger has access to 9 Eidolons. Even without Alexander, the Odin's Sword ability grants Dagger 9 Eidolon attacks. An aforementioned Final Fantasy Tactics allusion refers to worker number 9. One of Zidon's Dyne abilities is called Solution 9. Zidon's birthday is in September, the 9th month of the year. Garnet's coronation was supposed to happen on February 9th. There are 9 different thief swords and staves. Altogether, there are 9 friendly monsters in the game-long side quest to limit Ozma's powers. 9 ores are required to appease the first 5 monsters in the quest. One of the first field treasures the player can find is 9 gil of Grandma's savings from a residence in Alexandria. A Fabul Publications article pinned to the wall in Card Freak Gon's house in Lindblum is written by card collector number 9. To reveal Garnet's true name on the Eidolon wall in Medain Sari, the player must circle through the area 9 times. On the 9th round, HP and MP will be recovered and all status abnormalities removed. To complete the Lost Family side quest, the player must complete 9 different advancement points. And there are 9 boss fights in the final dungeon. One thing I will admit, I kinda had a bit of trouble finding facts that weren't widely known for this video, simply because the development of the game is pretty well documented. So ultimately, I plucked some of the more interesting facts that I found. And speaking of interesting, did you know that Banon is actually living a second life in Final Fantasy VI? This video was actually featured on a Final Fantasy Union video. I love that channel, so please watch this theory video. It is 2 in the morning and I just wanted to document the greatest moment in editing I've done so far. So I'm gonna undo this real quick And these are two different takes.
Okay. Regent Sid Seb.
And I'm going to delete the highlighted section to create one flowing section.
Planet of the solar system. Regent Sid Fabul the Ninth is the ninth Sid in Lindblom's lineage.
The word Fabul is cut in half, but you can't tell. Go me, I'm very tired.